A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
So, you know how when people talk about the government watching them, or international intrigue, they always go straight to the three-letter acronyms we all know. It is always the Central Intelligence Agency, or the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It is like Hollywood only has two colors in its crayon box when it comes to the world of shadows. If there is a trench coat involved, it is the CIA. If there is a windbreaker in a crime scene, it is the FBI. It is a total binary in the public imagination.
It really is a cinematic obsession, Corn. Herman Poppleberry here, by the way. And you are right, the public perception of the United States intelligence apparatus is almost entirely shaped by James Bond movies or police procedurals. We have this image of a lone operative in a tuxedo sipping a martini in a casino, or a gritty detective in a basement office surrounded by red string and corkboards. But our housemate Daniel sent us a prompt this morning that really highlights how much we are missing when we limit our view to just the big two. The reality of 2026 is that the most impactful work is not happening in a casino, it is happening in server farms and satellite ground stations.
Yeah, Daniel was asking about the forgotten agencies. The ones that do not get the flashy movies or the celebrity directors, but arguably hold more technical leverage over the global landscape than the Central Intelligence Agency does. When you actually look at the numbers, we are talking about an 18-member intelligence community. 18. Most people would struggle to name 5, and even then, they would probably guess the NSA and then stall out.
And that is by design to some extent, but it is also just a byproduct of what these agencies actually do. Most of them are not out there kicking down doors or recruiting assets in dark alleys. They are data processing engines. They are engineering powerhouses. If you want to understand how the United States actually maintains its edge in 2026, you have to look past the human spies and toward the signals, the sensors, and the orbital architectures. We are living in an era where the secret is less about what a person said in a room and more about what a sensor detected from 300 miles up.
And I think it is important to frame this correctly from the start. We are not just talking about bureaucratic niches or small offices in the basement of the Pentagon. We are talking about the massive technical backbone of American national security. We have touched on this a bit in the past, like in episode 969, where we talked about the reality of global intelligence versus the myths. But today, I want to really get into the weeds of who these people are and why their work is actually more relevant to the average person's security than a clandestine meeting in Vienna.
Right, and to set the stage, we have to mention the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, or the ODNI. This is a huge point of confusion. People often think the Central Intelligence Agency is the boss of everyone else, the top dog that tells everyone what to do, but that has not been the case for over 20 years. Since the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, the Director of National Intelligence is the one who actually coordinates the 18 agencies. They are the ones who put together the President's daily brief.
So the CIA is more like a department head rather than the CEO.
Precisely. The ODNI is the corporate headquarters, and the 18 agencies are the subsidiaries. It is a massive managerial challenge because you have everything from the Coast Guard Intelligence to the Department of Energy's Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence. You even have the Department of the Treasury's Office of Intelligence and Analysis, which follows the money.
Wait, the Department of Energy has an intelligence wing? That is one of those things that sounds like a conspiracy theory, until you realize they are the ones monitoring global nuclear signatures and protecting our power grid. It makes perfect sense. But it is totally off the radar for most people. I mean, who thinks of the guy checking the transformer as a spy?
Well, they are not exactly spies in the traditional sense. This brings us to the big distinction, human intelligence, or HUMINT, versus technical intelligence, or TECHINT. The CIA's bread and butter is HUMINT, that is, people talking to people, recruiting sources, and understanding intentions. But the agencies we are talking about today live in the world of TECHINT. This is where the National Reconnaissance Office and the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency live. These are the giants that the public rarely hears about, yet they probably consume more of the intelligence budget than almost anyone else.
Well, let's start there then. The National Reconnaissance Office, or the NRO. For a long time, the very existence of the NRO was a classified secret. It was not even declassified until the early 1990s. Before that, if you mentioned the NRO, you were basically talking about a ghost. Herman, give us the breakdown of what they are actually doing up there in the black.
The National Reconnaissance Office is essentially the nation's eyes and ears in space. They design, build, launch, and operate the reconnaissance satellites for the United States government. If a picture is taken from space for a classified purpose, or if a radio signal is intercepted from an orbital platform, the NRO is the one behind the curtain. And what is fascinating right now, especially as we look at the 2026 budget requests, is the massive shift in their philosophy. We are seeing a total pivot in how we think about orbital dominance.
You're talking about the move away from those massive billion-dollar satellites that are the size of a school bus, right? The ones they used to call exquisite platforms.
For decades, the strategy was to put up a few incredibly capable, incredibly expensive, exquisite satellites. These were masterpieces of engineering, but the problem is that those are big, slow, and very vulnerable targets. If a rival power has anti-satellite capabilities, or ASAT weapons, taking out one of those is a catastrophic loss. It is like putting all your eggs in one very expensive, very shiny basket. So, the NRO is currently in the middle of this huge transition to what they call a proliferated low Earth orbit architecture, or PLEO.
It is like the difference between having one giant lighthouse and 1,000 little flashlights all over the beach. If one flashlight breaks, you still see the whole beach. But how does that change the actual intelligence product? Is it just about resilience, or does it actually give us better data?
It gives us both, and that is the kicker. Resilience is the primary driver because we need to ensure our space assets are safe from interference. But the proliferated part means you get what is called high revisit frequency. In the old days, a satellite might only pass over a specific point on Earth once every few hours or even once a day. If something happened in between those passes, you missed it. With a PLEO constellation, which can consist of hundreds or even thousands of smaller satellites, you can have sensors over the same spot every few minutes. You move from taking a snapshot of a target to having a movie of it.
That is a huge distinction. If you are tracking a mobile missile launcher or a convoy in a conflict zone, you cannot wait 12 hours for the next pass. You need to see where it is moving in real time. But that brings up a massive technical hurdle that I know you love, Herman. If you have hundreds of satellites sending back high-resolution video and signals data 24/7, how on earth do you process that? No human analyst can sit through that much footage. You would need an army of millions just to watch the screens.
That is the trillion-byte question, corn. And that is where the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, or the NGA, comes in. They are the ones who take the raw data from the NRO and turn it into something a decision maker can use. And they have had to completely reinvent themselves in the last few years. They went from being the map makers to being the AI orchestrators. In the past, the NGA was where you went if you needed a highly accurate map of a mountain range. Today, it is where you go if you need an algorithm to tell you why there are suddenly 50 more trucks at a specific port than there were yesterday.
I remember we talked about this a little bit in episode 952 regarding the OSINT paradox. The idea that there is so much data that the secret isn't the data itself, but the algorithm that finds the needle in the haystack. The data is everywhere. The insight is rare.
Precisely. The NGA is now heavily focused on what they call activity-based intelligence, or ABI. Instead of an analyst looking at a picture of a shipyard and saying, "Oh look, there is a submarine," the AI is constantly monitoring the shipyard. It knows the normal pattern of life. It knows how many trucks usually arrive at 8 in the morning. It knows the heat signature of the dry dock. It knows the typical radio frequency chatter from the cranes. If anything deviates from that baseline, even by a small percentage, the system flags it for a human to look at.
So it is less about where is the thing, and more about what is happening that shouldn't be happening. It is a shift from static geography to dynamic behavior. It is almost like a global nervous system.
And a great example of this is Project Maven. It started as a Department of Defense project but has become a cornerstone of how the NGA operates. It uses computer vision to automatically identify objects in drone footage or satellite imagery. During the recent logistical disruptions we saw in early 2025, the NGA was using these automated change detection algorithms to map out supply chain bottlenecks in real time. They could see where trucks were piling up or where cargo was being diverted long before it hit the news. They were essentially seeing the macro health of the global economy through the lens of physical movement.
It is fascinating because it blurs the line between traditional spying and just high-level data science. But I want to push back on something here. If the NGA and the NRO are doing all this high-tech orbital work, where does that leave the Defense Intelligence Agency? People often confuse the DIA with the CIA because they both have intelligence agency in the name. But they have a very different mission, don't they?
They do. The Defense Intelligence Agency, or the DIA, is the primary producer of foreign military intelligence. Their customer is not necessarily the president in the same way the CIA's is. Their primary customers are the combatant commanders and the Secretary of Defense. They are the ones who have to figure out exactly how a foreign military's weapons work, what their doctrine is, and what their intentions are on the battlefield. They are the bridge between the intelligence world and the warfighting world.
So, if the CIA is trying to figure out what a world leader is thinking during a private dinner, the DIA is trying to figure out how that leader's tanks are going to move across a specific valley if a conflict breaks out.
That is a good way to put it. And the DIA is often the one doing the deep, technical analysis on foreign weapons systems. This is what they call scientific and technical intelligence, or S&TI. If a new missile is test-fired in the Pacific, the DIA is the one looking at the telemetry, the material science of the wreckage, and the radar cross-sections to tell our pilots exactly how to defeat it. They are incredibly academic in a way. It is a building full of PhDs in physics, aerospace engineering, and metallurgy who just happen to work for the military. They are the ones who write the China Military Power Report every year, which is basically the definitive guide to how another nation's military is evolving.
It strikes me that the DIA probably has the hardest job right now because of the democratization of intelligence. We've talked about this before, but with companies like Maxar and Planet Labs selling high-resolution satellite imagery to anyone with a credit card, the secrets that the DIA used to guard are now often visible on Twitter or Telegram. You have these hobbyists who are essentially doing the DIA's job for free.
You hit on a massive second-order effect there, Korn. This commercial intelligence complex is completely changing the landscape. In the past, if the United States wanted to show the world that a country was massing troops on a border, we had to decide whether to declassify exquisite satellite photos and risk revealing our technical capabilities. We didn't want the enemy to know just how clearly we could see them. Now the government can just point to a commercial satellite image from Maxar or BlackSky and say, look for yourself. It provides a layer of public truth that didn't exist during the Cold War.
It is a force multiplier for transparency. I mean, look at the regional conflicts we saw in early 2025. The public OSINT community, the open source intelligence hobbyists, were often identifying troop movements at the same time as the professional agencies. They were using Google Maps, TikTok videos, and commercial satellite feeds to track entire divisions. But I wonder, does that make the DIA less relevant, or does it just change their focus?
I think it makes them more relevant, but in a different way. When everyone has the data, the value moves to the interpretation. The DIA can look at that same commercial image and see things the hobbyists miss. They know the specific radio frequency signatures of the command and control vehicles. They know the logistical footprint required for a specific type of offensive. The secret is no longer the enemy is there, The secret is, the enemy will be ready to move in exactly 48 hours because we see the specific fuel bladders they are using, and those bladders only have a 48-hour capacity.
That is a great point. It is about the depth of the analytical framework. It is the difference between seeing a car and knowing exactly how much gas is in the tank based on how the tires are compressed. And I think this leads into something we should address, which is the political side of this. In our current landscape, there is a lot of talk about the deep state or the politicization of intelligence. But when you look at these technical agencies like the NRO or the NGA, they seem much more insulated from that kind of drama. They are focused on physics and math.
I agree. While the CIA and the FBI often find themselves in the crosshairs of political debate because they deal with human intentions, domestic policy, and subjective assessments, the technical agencies are much more objective in their output. A satellite image of a missile silo is not a matter of opinion. The radar signature of a stealth fighter is a physical fact. From our perspective, as supporters of a strong national defense and an America First policy, these technical agencies are the ones providing the ground truth that allows for sober, realistic foreign policy. You can't argue with a thermal signature.
Right. You cannot have a strong pro-American foreign policy if you don't have accurate data on what your adversaries are actually doing. Whether you are looking at the threat from China and the Pacific or the stability of the Middle East, these agencies provide the backbone for that decision-making. And I think it is important for our listeners to realize that these organizations are generally filled with incredibly patriotic, mission-focused people who are just trying to keep the country safe. They aren't interested in the headlines. They are interested in the telemetry.
And speaking of the Middle East, we have to mention how critical this technical intelligence is for Israel's security as well. The intelligence sharing between the United States and Israel, particularly from these technical agencies, is a cornerstone of regional stability. When we talk about missile defense or early warning systems, we are talking about the output of the NRO and the NGA being fed into joint operations. It is a seamless web of data that allows for things like the Iron Dome or the Arrow system to function. Without that orbital queuing, those systems would be much less effective.
It is a seamless web of data. But let's bring this back to something practical for the listeners. If someone is interested in this world, but they are tired of the cloak and dagger spy novels and want to see the real gears turning, how do they actually follow what is happening in this forgotten part of the intelligence community?
One of the best ways is actually through the budget process. Every year, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence releases a high-level summary of the National Intelligence Program budget, and the Department of Defense does the same for the Military Intelligence Program. But the real goldmine is the Congressional Budget Justification Books, or CBJBs. Even the redacted versions tell you a lot about the technical trends the government is worried about.
So you are saying we should follow the money to see the future of spying?
If you see a massive spike in funding for space-based infrared sensors or automated target recognition, you know exactly where the next 5 years of defense tech is going. You can see the shift from human intelligence to machine learning just by looking at the line items. It is not as exciting as a secret dossier, but it is much more accurate.
So if you see $1 billion moving into PLEO constellation maintenance, you know the NRO is doubling down on those flashlights on the beach we talked about.
And you can also track the commercial side. If you follow what companies like Black Sky or Hawkeye 36 are doing, you are seeing the unclassified version of the capabilities that the NRO is integrating into their classified constellations. Hawkeye 36, for example, does radio frequency mapping. They can find a ship in the middle of the ocean even if it turns off its GPS, just by detecting its radar or radio emissions. It is a way to see the shadow of the intelligence world without needing a top-secret clearance.
That is a great tip. It is about following the tech and the money rather than the headlines. Now, I want to pivot a bit to the future. We are sitting here in March of 2026. We have seen a massive explosion in large language models and generative AI over the last few years. How is that specifically impacting these forgotten agencies? We talked about automated change detection, but surely it goes deeper than just identifying trucks in a picture.
It goes much deeper. We are moving into the era of synthesis intelligence. Right now, the bottleneck is often the human analyst who has to read the report from the DIA, look at the image from the NGA, and listen to the signal intercept from the National Security Agency, and then try to make sense of it all. It is a lot of disparate pieces of a puzzle.
That sounds like a recipe for information overload. Even the best analyst can only hold so much in their head at once.
It is. But imagine an AI system that has access to all those streams simultaneously. It can correlate a spike in encrypted radio traffic with a sudden movement of vehicles and a satellite image, and a change in the social media sentiment in a specific region. It can provide a unified field theory of a specific event in seconds. The NGA is already experimenting with generative models that can query a map. You can ask the system, show me all the locations where a T-90 tank has been seen near a fuel depot in the last 72 hours, and it will generate the answer instantly, pulling from every available sensor.
That is incredible. But doesn't that create a risk where we rely too much on the model? I mean, we know these models can hallucinate. If an AI sees a missile launch that isn't there because of a glitch in the data or a weird reflection on a lens, that could be catastrophic. We have seen movies about this, and they usually end with a nuclear winter.
That is the human in the loop problem. And it is why these agencies are so focused on explainable AAI. They don't just want the answer, they want the system to show the evidence. They want the AI to say, I think there is a missile here because of these 3 pixels and this specific thermal signature, and here is the historical data that supports that conclusion. The human analyst is not going away, but their job is shifting from finding the data to verifying the AI's conclusion.
It is like the shift from being a researcher to being an editor. You are still responsible for the final product, but the machine did the heavy lifting. I think this really highlights why the spy archetype is so outdated. The most powerful person in the intelligence community today might not be a field agent in Moscow. It might be a data scientist at the NGA who knows how to fine-tune a model to spot a new type of camouflage.
I think that is a perfect way to frame it. The Bond era was about the scarcity of information, having one person in the right place at the right time to steal the blueprints. The modern era is about the abundance of information, having the best processing engine to make sense of the noise. And that processing engine is built by the agencies we have been talking about today. It is a game of math, physics, and computing power.
It is a complete paradigm shift, and it is one that I think Americans should be proud of. Our ability to innovate in these technical fields, satellite technology, AI, signals processing, is what keeps us ahead of adversaries who might have more people or more raw resources but don't have the same level of technical sophistication. It is a testament to the American engineering spirit. It is the Silicon Valley mindset applied to national survival.
Well said, Korn. And it is also worth noting that this technical dominance is a key part of our deterrence strategy. If an adversary knows that they cannot move a single tank or fire a single radio pulse without the United States seeing it and identifying it instantly, they are much less likely to take a risk. Transparency, fueled by high-tech intelligence, is a powerful tool for peace. It removes the gambler's chance from the equation.
That is an interesting way to look at it. Intelligence as a deterrent because it removes the element of surprise. If you can't surprise your enemy, your tactical options become a lot more limited. You can't sneak up on someone if they have 1,000 flashlights pointed at you.
And that is why the work of the National Reconnaissance Office and the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency is so vital. They are essentially removing the fog of war before the war even starts. They are providing the clarity that allows for diplomacy to work or for defense to be prepared.
So, to wrap this part of the discussion up, we have moved from the big two of the Central Intelligence Agency and the Federal Bureau of Investigation into this much larger, much more technical world. We have the NRO building the orbital eyes, the NGA providing the AI-driven vision, and the DIA providing the deep military context. It is a massive, interconnected system that most people never think about when they hear the word spy.
And we haven't even touched on the others, like the National Security Agency's role in signals intelligence or the specialized units within the Treasury and State Departments. But I think the core takeaway for today is that the technical agencies are where the real heavy lifting happens in the 21st century. They are the ones who provide the ground truth for everything else.
Definitely. So, Herman, if you had to give our listeners one practical takeaway from this, something they can do to better understand this landscape, what would it be?
I would say, start paying attention to the dual-use nature of technology. When you hear about a new advancement in commercial satellite imaging or a new breakthrough in computer vision, don't just think about how it affects your GPS or your photo app. Think about how that technology is being weaponized in a good way by these agencies to protect national security. The line between Silicon Valley and the intelligence community has never been thinner. If you see a cool new AI feature on your phone, chances are the NGA is already using a version of it to track something important.
That is a great point. And for those who want to dive deeper, I highly recommend checking out some of our past episodes. We mentioned episode 969 and 952, but also episode 521, where we talked about safe houses and front companies. It gives a different perspective on the physical infrastructure that supports these operations. It is the low-tech side of the high-tech world.
Yeah, that one was a classic. It is always interesting to see how the high-tech and the low-tech meet in the real world. Even a satellite needs a ground station, and even an AI needs a human to tell it what to look for.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. I think Daniel really hit on something important with this prompt. It is easy to get distracted by the flashy headlines and the political drama, but the real power often lies in the organizations that are too busy doing the work to hire a publicist. They are the silent sentinels.
And if you've been enjoying these deep dives into the weird and wonderful world of intelligence, technology, and everything in between, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Whether it is Spotify or Apple Podcasts, those reviews really help other curious minds find the show. We are trying to beat the algorithm, just like the NGA.
They really do. We love seeing the community grow. And remember, you can find all our past episodes and a whole lot more at myweirdprompts.com. We have the full RSS feed there if you want to subscribe directly, and it is the best place to keep up with everything the Poppleberry brothers are up to. We have some great stuff coming up in the next few months.
And if you are a Telegram user, definitely search for My Weird Prompts and join our channel. We post every time a new episode drops, and it is a great way to stay in the loop without relying on an algorithm to show you our content. It is our own little intelligence network.
It is funny. We spent a whole episode talking about how the government uses algorithms to watch the world, and here we are trying to help our listeners bypass the algorithms to find us. The irony is not lost on me, Herman.
The irony is not lost on me, Corn. But hey, that is the world we live in 2026. You have to know how the system works to stay ahead of it.
It certainly is. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of My Weird Prompts. We will be back soon with another deep dive into whatever strange and interesting topics come our way. We have some listener prompts about deep-sea cables that I think we need to get to soon.
Until then, keep asking questions and keep looking at the data. The truth is out there, usually in a redacted budget book.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We will catch you in the next one.
Goodbye for now.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts.